conference room on the 47th floor of Sterling Tower was a cathedral of glass and steel, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline that I had helped design. I had spent 5 years of my life in this building, pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into every project, every blueprint, every impossible deadline that I had made this company what it was. And today, they were going to throw me away like garbage. I sat at the end of the long mahogany table, my hands folded in my lap, my back straight, my expression calm. Inside, I was a storm. Inside, I was screaming. But I had learned over the years to hide my feelings behind a mask of professional composure. IT was the only way to survive in this world, a world that was not built for women like me. The board members filed in one by one. They were all men, all powerful, all wealthy, all convinced that they were the architects of their own success. They had no idea that I was the one who had built their empire, designed their buildings, solved their problems. They had no idea that I was the one who had kept Sterling architecture afloat while they were busy patting themselves on the back. And then my husband walked in. Julian Sterling, CEO of Sterling Architecture. The man I had married 7 years ago. The man I had loved with all my heart. The man I had believed in even when he didn't deserve it. He didn't look at me. He didn't acknowledge me. He walked to the head of the table, his face cold and expressionless, and he sat down in his chair like a king addressing his subjects. Eleanor, he said, his voice flat and dismissive, I'm afraid we have some bad news. The board has reviewed your recent performance, and we have decided to terminate your employment. Effective immediately. I stared at him. I had been expecting this. Of course, I had seen the signs, the late nights, the secret meetings, the way he had started avoiding my eyes, the way he had become distant and cold. But hearing the words out loud from the man I had married, the man I had given everything to, it was still a shock. On what grounds? I asked, my voice steady. Julian cleared his throat. The recent design disaster at the Hudson Yards project. The client has filed a complaint. They claim your design was faulty, that it caused significant delays and cost overruns that we have no choice but to let you go. I felt a cold fury rise in my chest. The Hudson Yards project was my design. I had spent months on it, perfecting every detail, every angle, every structural calculation. I had personally overseen the construction, ensuring that everything was done to specification. The delays and cost overruns have been caused by the client's own incompetence, not by my design. You know that's not true, I said. I have documentation that I have emails, reports, testimonies from the construction team. The design was flawless. The problems were caused by the client's failure to follow our specifications. You know this. Julian looked at me with cold, flat eyes. Eleanor, the board has made its decision. I suggest you accept it gracefully. We have offered you a generous severance package. Take it and walk away. I looked at the board members. They were all avoiding my eyes, staring at the table, at the windows, at anything but me. They knew the truth. They knew I was being set up, but they were too afraid to speak up. And then I saw him, Richard Chen, the newest member of the board. He was sitting at the far end of the table, a smug smile on his face. Richard had been hired 6 months ago, and I had been suspicious of him from the very beginning. He was too smooth, too polished, too eager to please Julian. I knew in that moment that Richard was behind this, that he had orchestrated the entire thing, that he had fabricated the complaint, manipulated the board, and convinced Julian to fire me. I didn't know why. Not yet, but I was going to find out. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I looked at Julian, and I felt nothing, not love, not anger, not even sadness, just a cold, quiet emptiness. Fine, I said. I'll take your severance package. But I want you to know, Julian, that this isn't over. This is just the beginning. I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. I remember the day Eleanor Sterling was fired. I was in the lobby of Sterling Tower, waiting to interview a source, when she walked out of the elevator. Her face was pale, her expression controlled, but there was something in her eyes, something cold and furious and terrifying. I watched her walk past me, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her back straight, her head held high. She didn't look like a woman who had just been fired. She looked like a woman who had just declared war. I didn't know then what she would become. I didn't know that this quiet, unassuming architect would transform herself into one of the most powerful women in the city. I didn't know that she would bring down the empire that had tried to destroy her. But I was curious, did I followed her, did I watched her? And I saw the rage beneath the surface, the determination behind the mask. I knew, in that moment, that Eleanor Sterling was not a woman to be underestimated. The months that followed were the darkest of my life. I was blacklisted from the industry. Julian made sure of it. He called every major architecture firm in the city, every contractor, every client, and he told them that I was unreliable, incompetent, untrustworthy. He destroyed my reputation, my career, my future. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't get an interview. I couldn't even get a response to my applications. I was a pariah, a ghost, a woman who had been erased from existence. I moved into a tiny apartment in a rundown part of the city. That I sold my car, my jewelry, my clothes, that I lived on ramen noodles and tap water. I stared at the ceiling every night, wondering how I had let my life become this, wondering how I could possibly survive. And then I found the documents. They were in a box I had packed in a hurry, a box I had forgotten about. They were from my old office at Sterling Architecture, files I had taken with me when I was fired. I had meant to go through them, to organize them, to decide what to keep and what to throw away, but I had been too depressed, too defeated to bother. Now, I opened the box and I started to read. The documents were a treasure trove of information. They contained everything I needed to destroy Julian and Richard. Financial records, email chains, internal memos, evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and corruption. I had been collecting these documents for years, without even realizing it. I had been building a case against Julian without knowing it. And now I had the ammunition I needed. I spent weeks going through the documents, organizing them, analyzing them. I started a secret investigation, using my remaining savings to hire a private investigator. I gathered testimonies from former colleagues, from contractors, from clients that I built a case that would bring down Sterling Architecture once and for all. But I didn't act immediately. I was patient. I was careful. I waited for the right moment to strike. When Eleanor contacted me, I was surprised that we had only met once, briefly, in the lobby of Sterling Tower, but she had remembered me. She had known that I was a journalist, that I had been investigating Julian Sterling for years, and she had decided to trust me. I met her in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. She looked different from the woman I had seen in the lobby. She was thinner, more tired, but there was a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She was no longer a victim. She was a warrior. She told me everything. The firing, the blacklisting, the documents. She showed me the evidence, the emails, the financial records. She gave me a story that would destroy one of the most powerful men in the city. And I took it. The article was published on a Thursday. IT was a comprehensive expose of Julian Sterling's crimes, the fraud, the embezzlement, the corruption. It detailed his affair with his business partner's wife, his manipulation of the board, his systematic destruction of anyone who stood in his way. The article went viral. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. Within days, it had been picked up by every major news outlet in the country. Julian Sterling was front page news, and not in a good way. The board panicked. Investors panicked. Clients panicked. Sterling Architecture's stock plummeted, losing billions of dollars in value. The company was in free fall, and Julian was at the center of it. I watched it all unfold from my tiny apartment. I felt nothing, not joy, not satisfaction, not even relief, just a quiet, peaceful emptiness. I had done what I set out to do. I had destroyed Julian Sterling. But I wasn't done yet. The meeting was held in the conference room of Sterling Tower, the same room where I had been fired, the same room where my life had been destroyed. I walked into the room, my head held high, my back straight. The board members were all there, looking at me with a mixture of fear and awe. Julian was there, too, his face pale, his eyes hollow. Richard Chen was there, looking like he had swallowed a wasp. "Eleanor," Julian said, his voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, a small, cold smile. I'm here to take back what's mine. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, a thick folder filled with documents. The same documents I had given to the journalist. "I have proof," I said, "that this company has been built on a foundation of lies. Proof of fraud, embezzlement, and corruption. I have proof that Richard Chen orchestrated my firing to cover up his own crimes. I have proof that Julian Sterling knew about it and did nothing." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Julian's face went white. Richard looked like he was about to faint. I am giving you a choice, I continued. You can either accept my terms, or I will release this evidence to the press, and I will watch this company burn to the ground. I laid out my terms that I wanted control of the company. I wanted Julian removed as CEO. I wanted Richard prosecuted for fraud. And I wanted a public apology from the board, admitting that they had wrongfully fired me. The board members looked at each other, their faces a mixture of fear and resignation. They knew they had no choice. They knew I had them. Fine, the chairman said, his voice trembling. We accept your terms. I watched the press conference from the back of the room. Eleanor Sterling, the woman who had been fired, blacklisted, and erased from existence, was standing on a stage in front of the entire world, accepting the position of CEO of Sterling Architecture. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. She had been beaten down, humiliated, and discarded. And she had risen from the ashes like a phoenix, stronger and more powerful than ever. I watched Julian Sterling, her ex-husband, standing in the corner, his face pale, his hands trembling. He had been stripped of everything, his power, his money, his reputation. He was nothing. He was dust. And I watched Eleanor. She was calm, composed, professional. She didn't gloat. She didn't sneer. She simply accepted the position with grace and dignity, as if she had always known she would end up there. She had won. She had won, and she knew it. I took control of the company and immediately began a massive restructuring. I fired the board members who had colluded with Julian and Richard. I hired new talent, diverse talent, people who believed in integrity and excellence. I rebuilt the company from the ground up, turning it into a symbol of resilience and justice. And I made sure Julian and Richard were held accountable for their crimes. Julian was charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. He was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Richard was charged with fraud and conspiracy and sentenced to 10 years. Isabella, Julian's mistress, was also charged. She had been complicit in the fraud, helping Julian hide his crimes. She was convicted and sentenced to 5 years. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nothing. I had simply done what needed to be done. I visited Eleanor in her new office, a beautiful space on the top floor of Sterling Tower. She was standing at the window, looking out at the skyline, her face calm and peaceful. You did it, I said. You actually did it. She turned to me and she smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. I did, she said, but I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me the story, I said. You gave me the ammunition. I just fired the gun. Either way, she said, we won. I looked at her and I saw something I had never seen before. She was happy, truly deeply happy. She had found her purpose, her passion, her power. What are you going to do now? I asked. She smiled. I'm going to keep fighting, she said. I'm going to make sure that no woman ever has to go through what I went through. I'm going to create a world where talent and integrity are rewarded, not punished. I'm going to make a difference. And she did. It has been 10 years since I took control of Sterling Architecture. 10 years of rebuilding, restructuring, and redefining what it means to be a leader in this industry. I have transformed the company into a global powerhouse, a symbol of excellence and integrity. I have mentored countless young architects, encouraging them to pursue their dreams despite the challenges they face. I have founded a scholarship for women in architecture, giving them the opportunities one never had. I have spoken at conferences, universities, and women's groups, sharing my story and inspiring others to fight for their dreams. I have also found love, a real love, a man who sees me for who I am, who respects me, who values me. He is kind, gentle, and supportive. He doesn't try to change me. He doesn't try to control me. He simply loves me. Julian is still in prison. Isabella is still in prison. Richard is still in prison. Their empires are dust, and their names are forgotten. I am free. I am powerful. I am happy. And I am just getting started. I remember the day I met Eleanor Sterling. She was a ghost, a shadow, a woman who had been erased from existence. I remember watching her walk out of Sterling Tower, her back straight, her head held high, and I remember thinking, this woman is going to change the world. I was right. She didn't just survive. She thrived. She didn't just fight back. She won. She didn't just rebuild her life. She built an empire. She taught me something that day. She taught me that the quiet ones are always the most dangerous. She taught me that people who've been hurt can become the most powerful people in the world. And she taught me that resilience, determination, and integrity are the most powerful weapons of all. I think about her sometimes, about the woman who transformed herself from a ghost into a legend. I think about the woman who took everything from the people who tried to destroy her. I think about the woman who had the courage to walk away from a life that was never meant to be hers, and the strength to build a new one, a better one, a life that was truly her own. She is an inspiration. She is a force of nature. She is, without a doubt, one of the most remarkable people I have ever met. And her story is not over. It is just beginning.